Hello everyone, and welcome back to Zelda's Deepest Lore. In this episode, we'll be discussing Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link. Released for the Famicom in 1987, it was the first sequel in the Legend of Zelda franchise. The game is best known today for how weird it was. It's one of only 2 games in the series to have 2D platforming segments, is the only game to feature an experience-based leveling system, and is considered to be one of, if not the, hardest games in the franchise. As of the release of this video, I haven't actually beaten it either, and not for a lack of trying. It's still a very interesting game, both from a gameplay perspective and a lore one. The story starts just a few years after the end of the last game. Zelda, now free, has taken over the country and is working to rebuild Hyrule. Link, now heralded as a hero, was doing his best to help as well. Everything changed around his 16th birthday. On that day, a mark appeared on the back of Link's hand, 3 golden triangles. Upon seeing this, he went to Impa, Zelda's wise old nursemaid, who told him that the mark meant that he was a hero of prophecy. Then she told him a legend that had been passed down through her family for generations. Long ago, there was a wise and noble king who ruled Hyrule. He wielded the Triforce in its entirety and was well loved. However, upon his death, the heir, the king's son, was only able to wield a portion of the Triforce. Searching for the rest of what he considered to be his birthright, he learned from a wizard the king had told the location of the Triforce to his daughter, the prince's younger sister, a girl by the name of Zelda. The two went to question Princess Zelda, but she refused to give away the location of the rest of the Triforce. Angered, the magician cast a spell to put Zelda into an eternal slumber. The prince tried to stop him, but was unable to, as with his dying breath, he sealed the curse on the young maiden. Distraught, the regretful prince sealed his sleeping sister inside the North Castle, and proclaimed that every royal princess from then on would be named Zelda in honor of his sister. And so, the princess remained sealed there for generations, still under the wizard's enchantment, her location known only to the Impa family. Upon entering a sealed chamber in an ancient castle, the two came across the sleeping princess. There, Impa gave Link 6 small crystals and an ancient scroll, on which was written a message in a language lost to time. However, Link found that he could read it easily, as if the scroll itself was speaking to him. Apparently written by the ancient king, the scroll said that, while he kept the Triforce of Power and Wisdom in Hyrule, he sealed away the Triforce of Courage for the next worthy wielder, who himself would become a king of Hyrule. In order to gain this power, Link had to travel to 6 temples scattered around Hyrule, defeat their guardians, and place a crystal into a statue hidden within each temple. Upon placing all 6 crystals, the barrier around the Valley of Death would open, allowing him to enter the Great Temple for his final test. But his quest would not go without trouble. Ganon's minions had learned that they could resurrect their master with the blood of the one who killed him, that being Link. So what was left of his demonic army spread throughout Hyrule in order to kill Link and reawaken the Demon King. However, despite the trials and those who wished to do him harm, Link made it to the Valley of Death, defeating not only its guardian, the Thunderbird, but also a dark reflection of himself, and successfully claimed the final piece of the Triforce. Awakening the princess, and presumably marrying her, Link lived out the rest of his days as the king of all of Hyrule. Many of the characters from this game are the same as the ones from the first, though a few years later. The first of these is, of course, Link. The game takes place around the time of his 16th birthday, and, as stated before, he opened the game attempting to help rebuild the Kingdom of Hyrule, and ended as its king, wielding the entirety of the Triforce. This, as far as we know, is the last that we heard of the original hero. No other games, outside probably Breath of the Wild, take place after this one, and that game has no mention of the Link of the NES era, so this is where we leave him. Next is the returning Princess Zelda. She took on the throne in between the last game and this one, and worked to rebuild her kingdom. By the end, she either married Link or left the throne for her ancestor. We're not quite sure which, though personally I believe the latter. Impa is also the same character from the first game, and she plays the same role as an exposition machine in the backstory of this game. We don't know what happens to her after the events of the Adventures of Link. We can assume that she continued to serve the royal family in some fashion. Though she doesn't appear in the game, we do learn a bit about her family history in the manual. it seems that her family has been serving the royal family for centuries, possibly longer, and has remained in the time trusted confidants to the royals. As we go through the series, we'll find that we can trace back her family line, or at least the Impa name, back throughout a majority of the series. Ganon is dead. Actually, legitimately dead. He doesn't appear in the game at all, unless you run out of lives, in which case he's finally revived. But, outside that, and his minions constantly barraging Link, he really isn't a major presence in this game. Just know that going in. Also, the satanic imagery with Ganon has returned twofold in this game. While last time there were only name similarities through him being the Demon King, in this game it's literally said that his armies come from the World of Spirits, which is a Japanese term for hell. Now we get into the new characters, with Princess Zelda I. She's the first known princess of Hyrule named Zelda, at least at this point in the series, is presumably centuries older than most of the other main characters. From the backstory, we can figure out that she's a very trustworthy person, being the only person the king entrusted with the location of the Triforce of Courage. She's also strong-willed, emphasized by the fact that she'd rather die than divulge the location of the artifact to her brother or the wizard. She starts off the game asleep within the Northern Palace, and ends it awake and alive, and possibly marrying Link, though as stated earlier, there's around a 50-50 shot at that. That's pretty much all that we know about her. Now, for the characters who only appear in the backstory, and are all most likely long dead. The first of these is the ancient unnamed king. We know that he ruled Hyrule when it was a much larger nation, and was able to wield the entire Triforce. This means that his heart must have been balanced between power, wisdom, and courage, at least later in life. He was also powerful with magic, as he was able to place an enchantment on the entire kingdom in order to find a successor. The king also created every boss in the game as a way to protect the barrier. All of those things outlasted not only him, but the very language he spoke. That mastery over magic possibly came from the mastery of the Triforce itself, but he can still perform some of these feats without the entirety of the Triforce, since there's no way he had access to the Triforce of Courage when he cast the sealing spell on Death Valley. Also, since his ideal successor was Link, it's a pretty safe assumption that, at least morality-wise, said king was very similar to the hero of Hyrule. The next person to discuss is the Prince, Zelda I's older brother. He was the son of the king and heir apparent, and was also able to inherit part of the Triforce. The English version of the manual makes it sound like he could only inherit one piece, but the wording in the Japanese version leaves it open to the possibility that he could take one or two. That means he had one or both of power and wisdom in high quantities, but not courage. We know that his actions led to the wizard cursing Zelda, but also that he tried to stop the wizard from casting his curse. It's important to note that he wasn't evil, just feeling betrayed and maybe a little bit jealous. He didn't want any harm to come to his sister. However, he was in position to be easily manipulated. He was manipulated, of course, by the magician. We know that he was the king's aide, but not much else. We don't know his name, his motives, or anything about his character, other than his skill in magic, and the wrath he displayed when Princess Zelda refused to give him the information he wanted. The game really opened up the world of Hyrule, in a very literal sense. Compared to the original game, Zelda 2 covers a massive expanse of area. If you want to know just how big the map is, look at this tiny corner down here. Do you see that area? Does it look familiar? Good, because that's the map to the original Zelda 1. That area as a whole is referred to as Death Mountain, which is also the name of Ganon's fortress in Zelda 1, and will continue to be a name heard throughout the Zelda series. One thing Zelda 2 includes the first game did not was towns. There are 8 villages around the map, the names of which you can see listed on the screen. Out of these villages, 6 of them share names with characters from Ocarina of Time. In-universe, it's generally agreed that the villages were named after said characters. The other 2, New and Old Kazuto Town, don't have a namesake we're aware of yet, but share many similarities to Kakariko Village in Twilight Princess. To start off this section, let's discuss, as they say, old business. There were 3 major concepts that we discussed in the last game that in some way were expanded here. The first of these, religion, was only brought out slightly. There are two items in this game that at all discussed religion. The first of these is the cross. While it isn't stated necessarily to be related to religion, as we can see from the magic shield, crosses are still magically powerful symbols in Hyrule. And, with all the Christian imagery discussed in the previous video, it's a safe bet that it is still a religious symbol. In the Adventures of Link, the cross allows Link to see invisible enemies. The other item, however, is a departure from the Christian symbolism we're so used to. One quest item in the game, which belongs to a woman in the town of Ruto, is called the Trophy in English versions of the game. However, in the original Japanese language, it's referred to as the goddess statue. The fact that it's called a goddess means that it depicts some figure that Hylians, or at least that one woman, worship. As God in Christianity is generally referred to as masculine, this doesn't line up with the use of Christianity, and more leads into the religion we see in later games, with the Golden Goddesses introduced in Link to the Past, and Hylia introduced in Skyward Sword. In fact, the goddess statue looks very similar to the statue of Hylia in Skyloft, so it's quite possible the statue was made to represent her. The second of these concepts is the power of music. This is the most minor addition, with only a single item reminding us of it: the flute. Obtained in the Ocean Palace, its only use is to remove obstacles and reveal hidden things, namely the River Devil and the Hidden Palace. It isn't much, but it shows that, still, music holds power in Hyrule. One final returning concept is, of course, the Triforce. In this game, we're introduced to the third piece of the Triforce of Courage, which was unused in the first game because it was sealed within the Valley of Death. It's also mentioned here for the first time that holding the entirety of the Triforce brings forth another level of power beyond that of just one or two pieces, though the exact power still hasn't been explained. There are also a few ideas introduced in this game for the first time. The first of these is the resurrection of Ganon. While a common theme later in the series, this is the first time it was revealed to be possible. In this case, the method was to sacrifice the blood of his killer, Link. While this is the only time the Link's death is specifically required, this is definitely not the only time the blood sacrifices are required for his return. This way, a lot of similarities can be drawn between this game and the third story of the Oracle games, which will be discussed more once we reach that point. This is also the first time we see multiple different Zeldas, and the only time that we ever see two Zeldas existing at once. It shows that the Zelda name is a tradition of the Hyrulean royal family, and its origin is the true, in-universe, quote-unquote legend of Zelda, or the namesake of the entire franchise. This is actually very similar to the monarchies in the real world, where monarchs will often take on the name of a previous king upon coronation. A great example of this is the Louis of France. This is also true outside politics, and is a common practice among Catholic popes. The tradition explains why there are so many princesses named Zelda throughout the series. Though, as we'll find out later, that tradition existed long before the girl we know as Princess Zelda I. The mark appearing on Link's hand is the first time we know of Link as a chosen hero. This is once more something we've come to accept over the years, with so many heroes told of in prophecy or being given the mark of the Triforce on their left hand. But Zelda 2 is the first time this trope is brought into existence for the Zelda franchise. The final concept I'll discuss today, and quite possibly the one I'm most interested in, is the final boss of the game. It isn't Ganon or some similar demon. It isn't an evil king or a giant monster set to protect the Triforce, but possibly the truest test of character there is, facing off against your own inner darkness. After defeating the Thunderbird in the Great Temple, Link takes the key and enters what he believes to be the Triforce Chamber. He enters an ornate room and sees the Triforce high above him, before it being taken away by some unknown force, and his shadow begins to take shape. For the first time in the series, Link has to face Dark Link, his own shadow. From its very inception, Dark Link is established to be a test for Link, a way for him to conquer his own fear and weakness, a poetic way for one to prove they are deserving of the highest symbol of courage in existence. There's only one other game in our timeline right now, and this game is explicitly stated in the manual to be a sequel to it. So that puts this game right after the first Zelda. Don't you worry, the timeline will become confusing, Eventually. We just haven't reached that point yet. As you can see, much like many other second games in large Nintendo franchises, Zelda 2 plays very differently from any other game of the series. It makes no sense to have come out after the first game, and is referred to as the black sheep of the franchise. And yet, it has introduced so much of what we are now connecting to the Zelda series. Without this game, the Zelda franchise would be very different, both thematically and story-wise. Even if the gameplay is jarring, this game is a must-play for any Zelda fan out there. I hope this video got you interested in seeing what Zelda 2 has to offer. As usual, special thanks to my editors and my sources, which you can see in the description. And, until next time, thank you for exploring the deepest lore.